This is a 51-year-old female office worker, relatively sedentary, who's had chronic mid-thoracic and TRAPS issues. The Spine 3D from Sensor Medica can show your data in various different formats, from looking at the photograph of the patient to slices view, deep grey. We prefer deep colour, it's better at showing depth and is akin to a heat map in terms of areas that are close to the camera, so it's very good for interpreting 3D rotational deformities, and the same when we're looking at the concavity. So this is the standard view that you get when you initially perform a scan. This is not to be confused with thermography. So this is a true depth LiDAR, light radar scan. It's bouncing infrared light off the body, which are then coming back to the camera, and it's measuring depth and creating a 3D reconstruction of the spine. So we can look at this in a three-dimensional image like this. Sometimes this data is overwhelming for the patient to interpret. So effectively, it can be described like a topography map of a mountain range, with the valleys being a deeper, darker colour, such as the purple, and the mountain tops being the lighter yellows and whites. And therefore you can actually see whether that spine has normal contours, whether the muscles are bulging, or there's rotational components, or even muscle wastage when looking at the glutes, paraspinals, etc. And switch that to 2D models as we're doing now. So we're looking in the coronal plane, but we have all of that 3D data to hand. We can decide to take or remove the information that's relevant. So if we actually find that there's some data that's being hidden by the vertebral images on the screen, we can actually remove those points. This is quite relevant when we're looking at rotation. So this person who has mid-thoracic pain, we can actually remove the thoracic component and actually see the rotational component. So you can actually see this would be spinous process, which is rotating to the left, which is actually thoracic body right rotation. And you can actually remove or add in as relevant. And so you can actually see this person has really subtle rotation, possibly not visible to the naked eye. And this is actually causing a huge amount of torque in their mid-thoracic. There's also potential for mild scoliosis in this area, which the machine is picking up at 22, 23 degrees. So there's actually a shift, and that will actually correlate with the shoulder, where she gets all of her pain. And so there's a mild shift and rotation, two components required for scoliosis. When we look at her sagittal view, so we can look at the natural view and add and remove the planes. That's quite handy for showing the patient the orientation of each area. There's lots of data that we can extrapolate from here, from the different angles of the trunk, for the relationship between the thoracic and the lumbar spine, the lordotic angle, thoracic angle, etc. And a lot of the information is related to transitions, too much forwards, backwards, which could create upper cross syndrome or military back, sway back, etc. So we have a slightly increased upper thoracic kyphosis, which the peak of that does match where her rotation and curve point is. And then we can click on the normative range, and this will, like a traffic light system, will tell us the areas that are red, amber and green. So there are some amber concern areas, but nothing red. This does match her presentation. Medically, never been diagnosed with anything formally. Symptoms have been chronically managed from a symptomatic perspective, be that by painkillers, massage, etc. We can see from here, we can put on these points which will actually show the shoulders and the hips. This is the vertebral prominence, C71. This is actually down in the lumbar spine, so it's usually S2, each shoulder. And then this is actually the dimples, they call them, dimple left and dimple right, but that's PSIS to us. And of course, we can scroll up and down, either looking at the normative data and clicking on that one, or scroll the slider up and down. And so there is a mild amount of rotation, only 3 or 4 degrees. And we can look at this from various different angles. Again, showing the normative values, which are within a subtle range. Less than 5 degrees of rotation is okay. but this patient would really benefit from some mirror image adjusting in that thoracic spine and some rehabilitation, which is one-sided, really opening up and derotating that mid-thoracic spine, as well as possibly checking her for spinal cord detethering. So the scan has been very informative as to helping the patient understand there's a bigger problem than perhaps ever been picked up before medically. And whilst this is on the milder end of the side, it doesn't necessarily correlate with the severity of her symptoms. And this patient was very engaged in their care because they fully understood why they were doing these exercises beyond just pain relief.